Hi, everyone. I'm going to give away the punchline for this panel. If you came here thinking that mobile is the future of enterprise, I think you're going to hear that it may be a part of the solution, but it's probably the wrong question. So let's get into how we're going to sort out mobile and desktop in the world of apps. Maybe I could ask Edith if you could just quickly summarize what LaunchDarkly does and how it perhaps relates to the full stack of apps developers that we have on stage.
Sure. I'm Edith. I'm co-founder and CEO of LaunchDarkly. We help software companies all over the world launch and control their features. So we have everything from small startups to banks, paint companies, cruise lines, all using us to build better software.
Russ, you want
Yeah, Ross Mason, the founder of Mulesoft. So we do something that's quite hard to explain. My mum has no idea what we do, which is difficult at dinner. But we essentially, we take the assets inside enterprises, both small and large, right? So we have customers, everyone from McDonald's all the way to Spotify. And what they're doing is they're packaging up their data and capabilities, right? So customer information or checking account balances or signing up a subscription for Spotify goes through our platform. And what they do is they package that up as APIs and they make that available to the developers inside the organization, right? So the reason why this topic is kind of interesting is just because the way mobile apps work is that you then take those building blocks and you build value on top of it. So we see a lot of mobile in our consumer base.
So Paulo, you're a consumer of his APIs, I understand.
Yeah. So what we do is we are in a very new space, just created last year. It's called low-code development platforms, and these platforms use visual modeling instead of coding, and they integrate the whole cycle of deploying and running these applications as well as development. And so the benefits end up that the project of about 2 years gets compressed to 7 months. And a project of about 1 year gets compressed to 12 weeks. And so everything is much faster and more agile in terms of development. And the types of apps that we have 42 industries as customers, so it's from mobile, web, we see everything.
So people may not know this, OutSystems is really Portugal's largest tech company. Although it's very active, I think it has 2 offices in the US and active around the world.
We're present in 41 countries. We have 11 offices spread across the world. And in the United States, we have 2 big offices, one in Boston, one in Atlanta. And this is our R&D center in Lisbon.
Got it. And Ross, maybe you could explain or describe some of your bigger customers and just how you work with the larger community of API developers.
Yeah, so most of our customers, well, probably 50% of our customers are going through some sort of pretty radical transformation, right? So they're trying to figure out how to create better consumer experiences, whether it's through mobile, whether it's through chat experiences, whether it's through sort of smarter recommendation engines, or new partner experiences, or actually better employee experiences. That's actually another big one. Because there's so much software coming into enterprises today, it's getting really difficult for employees to navigate and understand where to find information, how to get access to things. So there's a lot more investment in the workforce within the organization as well. And what we do with them is help them, not just give them the technology to go and build these APIs, but we also have an approach, right, to build out these sets of capabilities. And what they end up doing is creating a set of reusable building blocks, a bit like the way the web works, right? All the apps on your phone is built from tens of open APIs. Well, we build the same type of APIs for enterprises and then give them a platform which ends up, we call it an application network, where they can go and discover and reuse and get access to those services. So someone like a McDonald's, for example, they built their whole digital strategy on us. And the first application was mobile, so you can now, many countries order on the McDonald's app. But also, if you go to the kiosks inside the stores, they're using the same platform of APIs, but they're offering a different experience. And then in some countries, they use the same APIs for the point-of-sale system where there's somebody hosted there.
Maybe you could explain, you had a recent announcement with Temenos, which is for people who don't know it, a European core banking software provider that's trying to move into the United States. Just talk a little bit about what you provide to a Temenos.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, and I don't know many people will know, but Temenos is like a core banking platform, right? So they do current accounts, checking accounts, and provide all the core banking functions that most of the big banks we use would supply to you as a service. And for them, they capture a lot of capabilities and a lot of data. And the app works within the organization. The app isn't very good at exposing some of those capabilities out to other parts of the organization where new applications can be built on top of it, or where they can extract new data to look at sort of transactions in an account and start making recommendations about what people are spending on and whether they should be budgeting differently. So what we do is we work with Temenos and we open up a set of APIs on top of that, and those APIs get published into an application network. And that means developers in any part of the organization, or even an ecosystem outside the organization, can discover and use those services and build new applications and new services.
Edith, maybe you could explain what feature flagging and dark launching is. I think it's a pretty interesting concept once people understand what it is you do at the core of your business.
Yeah, great. So dark launching is actually a concept that Facebook popularized. I know they talked right before us about how they had the ability to basically launch features internally first.
A/B testing.
Well, not even A/B testing, just battle harden them internally, get a lot of feedback internally, and then start pushing them out to different constituencies, whether that be that you want to do it country by country or company by company. They have an internal framework that allows them to do that.
So basically, you're bringing that to everybody else.
We're building that power to everybody else. And the really exciting thing is how much it transforms people's businesses. Once they have this ability to say, okay, instead of having to do this big push where it goes out to perhaps global customers, you can say, okay, let me just push it out to this McDonald's in the UK, make sure it works.
Yeah, we need this, definitely.
I made a sale on stage. Yeah. It really gives you a lot of power and flexibility and the ability to be more agile in your own business. If instead of worrying about a global launch, you could say, let's battle harden this customer by customer by customer.
So, Paulo, maybe I could ask you, a hot startup wants to build a cool new mobile app, and they come to you. I mean, are they asking the wrong question when is mobile first the right question these days?
Actually, I don't think that's the right question. And the most successful projects we see in the enterprise, the question starts with what is the experience you want to digitalize? And that experience usually results into a mixture of experiences and touch points. So usually,
give a concrete example of maybe a popular app that people might encounter from the audience that you've helped develop.
We are in the business of enabling weird stuff that's out of the ordinary.
We're in that business too. That's
yeah,
right.
I guess we are in the same business.
They're all in this business.
But we, I encountered, for instance, an insurance company that wanted to streamline the process of auditing claims. And you would expect that the typical thing is give an app, a mobile app, to the claims handler so that it goes to the rec, and they can take pictures and whatever. And that would be almost like the front idea or the ideation to digitalize that process. What they actually did is, because they have special conditions in their country, they created two apps, one which is a desktop app integrated with a mobile app, and they gave the mobile app to students, and they used students as intelligent cameras conducted by the auditor that sat at the desktop. The country was very wide, and it was very expensive for the auditor to fly to the rec. And so they sent students using a Uber driver almost like model, where they use cameras. And so that what we're seeing more and more is that collection of touch points between web, native, mobile. Native is going up again. And a lot of just the web browsing across multiple form factors and an increasing number of usage of sensors and of IoT. So it's a lot of touch points, really.
For anyone on the panel, do you have any humorous stories of people who came to you talking about mobile apps when really what they needed were native apps that could serve, the range of particular platforms that their customers use?
Yeah, I mean, for us, not so much amusing as maybe absolutely tragic stories of just where people start and where they end, and understanding what a mobile app's going to be. We've actually got some pretty good success stories, actually. I kind of like talking about those because I think the learnings there are really interesting. So we've got one customer called Huawei, which is a gas station. They have about 250 gas stations in the east coast of America. And they wanted to build a mobile app, and they came with this, we want to be like the Starbucks mobile app for loyalty points. And we're not a digital organization in terms of advising on strategy, but we're like, why do you want that? Couldn't really figure it out. And it turns out they had all these other really interesting dynamics in their business. They had a very loyal customer base. Mm-hmm. Turns out they have these donuts that people will drive miles and miles to get hold of, and they sell them as part of, picking up gas. So that works in the US quite well. So with them, what happened was, I think their understanding of what mobile was going to be changed dramatically in a space of like 4 months. And they used to come on stage at some of our conferences and talk about where they started, which was this sort of loyalty app. And then within about 12 months, it turned into a completely different sort of digital channel in which to push out new products and services much quicker. And even in the first iteration, the complexity of the app was also a big surprise. So people don't realize this, but when you look at your phone, it's got a few fields, and it's all context aware. It seems like it should be really simple, but behind that, there's hundreds of connections. I mean, for them, they had about 58 APIs to the back end. They also introduced 20 new technologies to make the first version of the app work. And I think the investment needs to be up front to think about it not as a single app to copy someone else, but think about what do you want to do to engage your audience, and then don't underestimate the complexity of bringing all that together to drive a coherent experience.
Maybe the panelists could talk a little bit about why so much of software development is still desktop-based.
I think that's not I was going to add, I think mobile first was very popular about 5 or 6 years ago. I was a product at TripIt, and it was very popular back then because it was a very viable distribution channel.
You were effectively the most popular consumer booking app in the early days of smartphones, right?
We were the #1 travel app. We didn't take bookings, but just we were #1, and it had this self-reinforcing position in the App Store where if you were #1, you remained #1. It was kind of like the bestseller list. People saw you #1 and they kept downloading you. Now it is much, much, much more difficult to break into the App Store. It's extremely crowded. There's just it's not a way to get users anymore. It's more to Paulo's point or your point. If you have some sort of app that needs to exist only as mobile, it is very good, but don't do it just to get eyeballs.
Paulo, maybe you could just talk about omni-channel and what customers are really talking to you about.
There's several things at play here, and the cool thing about our positioning is we see thousands of projects being built and they evolve, right? So about 75% of the interfaces in the projects we see are web-based. And I think the reason we saw the uptake of mobile is going to be bigger in terms of the touch points. What happened is that when you do a mobile app, you need to redesign you need to kind of almost disrupt the process. People have a way of thinking that's much more incremental. And so innovation that's incremental is very common. Disruptive innovation is hard. And so a lot of the projects tend to be, let's do and optimize this web interface or this desktop interface. And as the thing kind of progresses, this journey could be extracted out of a tablet And after a while, you end up by having a more omni-channel system. But when you start, you tend to start with a smaller gap from what you have. And so I think it's a pure evolutionary process. And besides, there's still a lot of work you do sitting down on a desk. Yeah. And the desktop is better for that. I mean, the only alternative is you do a Steve Jobs thing where you relax with a tablet. But you need to redesign an interface that's much harder than doing it on a desktop where you have a keyboard and a mouse.
So as apps developers, as DevOps companies, how much do you see the big internet players as they try to do their internet services, be it Facebook Workplace, which we just saw on stage, Slack, various efforts that Apple periodically undertakes to kind of move into the enterprise apps market. How much, is that sort of separate and distinct from what you do, or do you kind of have a play into some of these kind of...
I'm sorry, the separation for what?
With just the technology platforms that the bigger internet companies are creating, be it Slack or Facebook Workplace, is that sort of all the apps that don't come to you, or?
No, it's actually interesting, because if you look into the architecture and the stacks, and Ross is right in this, is that they are converging. The only difference between a digital leader like a Facebook or a Netflix and the rest of the population is the access to engineers. And that makes all the difference. What we see is that while Netflix has 1,100 engineers just to take care of the 500 microservices network that they have,
got it.
A company like, I don't know, AXA, somewhere in the world is going to have a much smaller pool of that talent. So I think that the issue there is how much automation you can provide to the rest of us that are not in the 0.01% of access to MIT students and CMU students. Well,
great. I think we have to end it here. We've run out of time. Thanks to the panelists, and
thank you.
Thanks for the audience.
Thank you.